The screens around us were burning red. Payments stalled mid-transfer. Hospital billing queues frozen. Payroll batches trapped in endless retry loops. I was standing at the center of it all, actively containing an attack I had spent years preparing for an incident response playbook I built myself for moments no one ever wants to face. You're probably curious about what's going to happen. Right. But let me pause for a moment to have another sip of warm water. As it's colder than expected today, I wonder what the temperature is where you live right now, and if you're still listening, please leave your lucky number as a friendly greeting. I was mid-sentence, walking the team through containment, when Derek Holloway cut across the room. He didn't ask what phase we were in. He didn't ask how long until stabilization. He didn't even look at the dashboard screaming behind me. He glanced at a spreadsheet on his phone and smirked. "Kiri," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're done. You cost too much. HR already processed your termination." The words landed wrong, not because they were unexpected, but because of where we were standing when he said them. $550,000 an hour. Active breach. Systems held together by controls I designed. And the COO decided this was the right moment to make an example. I was the principal incident response architect, the person who built the escalation logic, the kill paths, the access hierarchy no one else fully understood. When incidents crossed a certain threshold, everything routed through me by design. Derek, on the other hand, only understood numbers once they showed up neatly summarized at the end of a quarter. "You're not special," he added, shrugging. "We'll figure it out without you." That was when the shock faded. Anger surged hot, sharp, tempting. Then it compressed into something colder, quieter, more dangerous. I nodded, logged out, stepped away from the console. "Okay," I said evenly. "Then this is no longer my incident." Behind me, the alerts kept climbing. "Before we continue, I want to be clear with you. The story you're about to hear is a blend of real workplace situations and fictional elements, with artificial intelligence used to deepen the emotional experience and help deliver the message. I hope it resonates with you. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Please rest well and take care of yourself tonight." I had already fixed problems this company pretended never existed. Years earlier, an audit flagged a transaction anomaly that would have triggered regulatory penalties north of $40 million. I rewrote the validation logic overnight, documented it quietly, and the finding disappeared before it reached the board. No celebration, no bonus. Silence. Another time, a vendor swore their platform was secure. I proved it wasn't. I traced a vulnerability buried so deep their engineers denied it could be real. I patched it myself, sealed the exploit, and stopped a breach no press release ever mentioned. The vendor kept the contract. I kept responsibility. Those moments replayed fast and bitter as Derek leaned against the table like this was a budget meeting. He smiled, the kind that meant he'd already decided who was disposable. "Anyone can follow a checklist," he said. Dismissive. That was the lie that always came last. Checklists don't stop cascading failures. They don't understand why systems behave differently under stress. They don't make judgment calls when documentation runs out and everything is still burning. HR stepped forward, voice tight, eyes avoiding mine. They recited policy like a shield. "For security reasons," they said. I needed to log out immediately. "All access revoked. Effective now." The injustice stacked neatly, fired mid-crisis, reduced to a line item, erased by people who had never touched the system. I felt the room waiting for me to argue. I didn't. I logged out. Every session, every console, every credential. Compliance. No discussion. Compliance has a way of clarifying things when emotions try to interfere. Once HR confirmed my termination, the rules stopped being flexible. I wasn't angry anymore. I was precise. I stated it calmly, almost helpfully. As a non-employee, I could not legally touch production systems. Any action I took would expose the company to liability, regulatory violations, and audit failure. The policies Derek liked to quote suddenly mattered again. Silence followed. Not confusion, but calculation. Legal joined the call within minutes. Their questions were careful, technical, restrained. Was access already revoked? Had I performed any actions post-termination? Did anyone instruct me to continue working? Each question tightened the room. I answered truthfully and briefly, no, 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 while they debated risk. The incident kept moving. The attack vector pivoted, slipping from payment clearing into hospital billing. Claims queues stalled. Insurance authorizations froze. Patient discharges slowed. The cost counter climbed. Now paired with a different kind of exposure, one that regulators take personally. I watched it all from a step back. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because knowing and acting were no longer the same thing. Control doesn't always look like intervention. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Legal finally reached consensus, without an active employee authorized at my level. No one could execute the next containment step. Temporary access was discussed, then dismissed. Emergency exceptions required signatures that weren't available. Every shortcut Derek wanted ran directly into compliance walls he had helped build. Then it happened quietly. An automated safeguard I designed years earlier detected the missing authorization tier and triggered a defensive lock. Not a failure, a protocol. Systems isolated themselves to prevent unauthorized manipulation. No alarms, just more red. No one looked at me, but everyone understood. The system wasn't broken. It was behaving exactly as designed, and the only person who could unlock it no longer worked there. That realization settled over the room slowly, like cold math, as the gap between authority and access became visible, measurable, and suddenly impossible for them to ignore without admitting who caused it in silence. 6 hours after I stepped away, the room stopped pretending this was manageable. Numbers have a way of stripping optimism clean. The loss counter no longer hesitated. It climbed with confidence, recalculating itself every few minutes as systems failed to recover. 550,000 an hour became 700. Then 700 quietly became 900. As secondary systems began to collapse under the strain, people started pacing. Voices rose, then dropped. Phones vibrated constantly, unanswered alerts stacking faster than excuses. This was no longer a technical incident. It was a financial event, the kind executives fear because it refuses to stay contained. Every frozen payment echoed outward into penalties, contract breaches, and regulatory attention no one could spin away. Derek stopped talking altogether. The board didn't. They joined remotely, faces sharp and unsmiling. Skipping pleasantries like time was another cost they could no longer afford. One of them asked a single question, slowly, deliberately. Who exactly fired the only escalation owner? The room held its breath. Derek straightened, jaw tightening. He glanced toward legal, then away. I could see the calculation forming, the instinct to protect position over truth. When he answered, his voice was steady, rehearsed. She quit. The word landed heavier than silence. No one challenged him immediately. That was the dangerous part. Lies don't need agreement to function. They just need time. And for a moment, Derek bought himself a few seconds of it. But the math didn't care. The damage curve kept climbing. Hospital billing delays triggered external audits. Payment failures breached service-level agreements. Clients began escalating directly to the board, bypassing Derek entirely. Every call added weight to the same question no one wanted to repeat. If she quit, why can't anyone replace her? I stayed where I was, detached, watching panic spread in patterns I recognized too well. This was what happens when authority outruns understanding, when decisions are made for optics instead of systems. By the time the board muted Derek's line, the number on the screen had stopped changing colors. It didn't need to anymore. Everyone in that room finally understood what it meant. If you agree that stepping back, following compliance, and letting the consequences speak for themselves was the right move here, leave a 1 in the comments. Your perspective deserves to be heard. HR loved the word policy. It sounded neutral, harmless, almost intelligent when repeated often enough. They used it now like a shield, standing between chaos and accountability. explaining why they could not bring me back. Not even temporarily. Not even with losses approaching 7 figures per hour. Policy, they said, prevented rehiring a terminated employee during an active incident. Policy restricted emergency contracts. Policy required review, signatures, and cooling periods. Each sentence was delivered carefully, as if precision could replace judgment. I watched them perform this ritual while the incident kept spreading. Payment failures cascaded into reporting systems. Hospital billing delays triggered automatic compliance flags. Clients escalated again, louder this time. HR nodded sympathetically and repeated the word that absolved them of responsibility: policy. The audit committee did not share their affection. They requested logs, not summaries, not interpretations, but raw records, access changes, termination timestamps, authorization trails, emails. HR complied quickly, relieved to pass responsibility upward. That was when the tone shifted. Buried in the archive was the termination email, time-stamped squarely inside the incident window. No ambiguity, no misunderstanding. Clear language, clear authority, clear disruption. The committee read it silently. No one defended it. No one joked. Questions followed, sharper now. Who approved this action? Was legal consulted? Was operational risk assessed? Each answer tightened the room. Each response exposed how thin the justification really was. HR stopped saying policy. They started saying process. That didn't help. The committee excused themselves briefly, then returned with a decision that landed harder than any alert. An internal investigation would be opened immediately. Scope expanded beyond the incident itself to include executive conduct, decision authority, and risk governance failures. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The irony was almost elegant. Policy had been used to remove me. Now policy was being used to examine everyone else. And unlike before, there would be no shortcuts, no spreadsheets, no smirks, just documentation, accountability, and consequences unfolding exactly as designed. For the first time, policy stopped protecting the loudest voices and started exposing the quiet decisions that actually broke everything in plain sight. The call came long after the building went quiet. My phone vibrated on the table, a number I recognized but had never seen this late. I answered without greeting. "Kira," the CFO said. Voice low, rushed. "We need to stabilize this. Just help us bridge the gap." I listened. He talked about exposure, about clients demanding answers, about numbers that had stopped being theoretical. He avoided names. He avoided blame. He framed it as cooperation, as professionalism, as a favor everyone would forget once the crisis passed. "This doesn't have to be formal," he added. "Just temporary." That word landed differently now. Temporary was how they justified cutting corners. Temporary was how decisions escaped consequences. I pictured the dashboards I was no longer allowed to touch, the locks doing exactly what they were built to do. "I don't do temporary anymore," I said. Silence stretched. Then bargaining. He asked what it would take to get me back in the room, to type a few commands, to make the numbers slow down. He promised clean paperwork later. He promised appreciation. He promised distance from Derek. Power shifts don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly. When urgency meets scarcity. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I can consult. I said, independently. He exhaled. "Name your terms." I named them. An emergency consulting rate reflecting the damage curve they'd created. A minimum engagement. Payment before access. Written authority acknowledging scope. Liability and decision rights. No shortcuts. No back channels. "That's higher than expected." He said, "It's accurate." I replied. He paused. Then said, "Send it." When the call ended, nothing around me had changed. The systems were still locked. The incident was still live, but the direction had reversed. Hours earlier, I'd been removed with a sentence. Now they were asking permission. I drafted the agreement carefully, detached, precise. Control didn't come from returning to the console. It came from choosing the terms under which I would. The leverage was undeniable, earned through restraint, documented authority, and the simple fact that urgency had finally met the limits of their own rules without excuses remaining any. I returned under a different title, and that difference mattered. The contract arrived signed, stamped, and wired before sunrise. The rate was high enough to make silence uncomfortable, and the clauses were airtight, scope defined, authority explicit, liability allocated, no favors, no assumptions, only obligations that worked both ways. I wasn't rehired, I wasn't reinstated, I was retained. That distinction changed everything. I logged in using credentials issued for consultants, not employees, with boundaries drawn in legal language instead of trust. The room felt smaller, quieter. No one joked. No one gave orders. They waited. I moved through the systems methodically, touching only what the agreement allowed. Containment first, then isolation, then correction. Each step executed cleanly, documented as I went. When someone tried to rush me, I pointed to the contract. When another tried to redirect scope, I declined. Control stayed where it belonged. There was a strange satisfaction in it. Not joy, not relief, but something colder. I was doing the same work I had always done, but now every decision carried weight because it was mine alone. No manager hovering, no spreadsheet filtering urgency, just reality responding to competence. Within hours, the attack lost momentum. Payment flows resumed in controlled phases. Hospital billing queues unlocked without error. Payroll batches cleared. The counter slowed, then stopped climbing. Screens shifted from red to amber, then green. One by one. No applause followed. None was needed. I saved logs, finalized reports, and closed my session exactly as outlined. When I stepped back, the incident was contained, not because of heroics, but because the right authority had finally been applied. I left the room unchanged. Except for one thing. I no longer belonged to them. They belonged to the agreement they had accepted when urgency forced honesty. And that, more than the rate, was the part that felt right. It wasn't victory or revenge, just clarity earned the hard way, where skill met leverage, and silence proved more powerful than arguments. Because systems, contracts, and time eventually reveal who truly holds control when pressure rises and excuses fail completely everywhere always. I submitted the incident report the same way I handled everything else: clean, technical, unemotional, no adjectives, no opinions, just timelines, authorization paths, and system behavior under stress. It documented what failed, what locked, and why. It also documented who had authority at each moment and who removed it. The audit committee didn't treat it like paperwork. They treated it like a map. My report let them trace the incident backward, step by step, past the alarms and losses, straight to the decision that changed the trajectory. Not the attack, the termination. They asked when escalation authority was revoked. The timestamp was clear. They asked who approved it. The name was attached. They asked what happened next. The losses spoke for themselves. Payment delays multiplied. Hospital billing exposure triggered penalties. Client contracts crossed breach thresholds. Every consequence lined up behind a single choice. Derek tried to explain. He framed it as cost discipline. He called it decisive leadership. The report didn't argue with him. It simply disagreed, silently, with math. It showed how removing the escalation owner forced automated locks, delayed containment, and expanded impact. It showed how much each hour of delay cost. And why. Audit didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. They cited policy, governance standards, and fiduciary duty. They referenced my report repeatedly, not as testimony, but as evidence. Every page reduced Derek's defense until it became procedural noise. When the decision came, it was brief. Derek was suspended pending further review. Effective immediately. Access revoked. Authority transferred. The same mechanisms used against me applied upward without ceremony. I watched the update arrive without reaction. Justice rarely feels dramatic when it's finally activated. It feels administrative, quiet, final. The report closed my involvement, but it opened something else entirely. Accountability, once triggered, doesn't need emotion to finish its work. It just follows the trail left behind. It moved through committees, calendars, and signatures, faster than rumors ever could, because facts travel cleanly when no one tampers with them, and consequences arrive on schedule when authority finally answers to documentation instead of ego and denial fails. Silence filled the boardroom in a way noise never could. Derek was still talking, still pushing words forward as if momentum might save him. He blamed HR first, then process, then urgency. He said he acted on incomplete information. He said anyone would have made the same call. Each sentence sounded smaller than the one before it. The board let him speak until he ran out of places to hide. Then the chair leaned forward and asked one question. Calm and surgical. Can you quantify your mistake? Derek blinked. He started with principles, then intent, then culture. None of it answered the question. The chair waited. Numbers, not narratives. That was the rule now. Legal shared the figures, lost transactions, regulatory penalties, breached contracts, extended downtime caused by revoked escalation authority. The total appeared on the screen, precise and merciless. It was larger than Derek's entire cost-cutting initiative for the year. The room didn't react. No gasps, no arguments. Collapse rarely announces itself. It just settles. Derek tried once more. He said the situation was exaggerated. He said Kira could have stayed. He said HR misled him. The board listened without interruption. The way adults listen when a decision is already made. The vote was called quietly. No speeches, no eye contact, just devices lighting up, one by one, registering decisions that didn't require justification. When the result appeared, Derek stopped speaking mid-breath. Termination approved, effective immediately. I wasn't in the room, but I felt the shift anyway. Authority leaving a space has weight. It changes the air. The same system that removed me without hesitation had now finished recalculating its error. Nothing dramatic followed. Security escorted him out. Access was revoked. Calendars updated. Life moved on. Total collapse doesn't look like chaos. It looks like order correcting itself. And everyone understood the silence was permanent, measurable, and deserved. No appeals followed after that moment, for anyone present. I declined the offer to return as an employee without hesitation. It wasn't anger driving the decision anymore, but clarity. I had seen exactly how value was measured inside that building, and I no longer fit inside their formulas. Work didn't disappear when I walked away. It multiplied. Contracts arrived from institutions that had watched the incident unfold and understood what silence, compliance, and control were worth. I chose projects. I chose timelines. I chose when to step in and when to step back. For the first time, my security came from my expertise, not permission. The irony wasn't lost on me. They believed they were removing a cost. What they actually removed was dependency. I didn't escape. I recalibrated. That freedom was quiet, earned, and permanent, not borrowed from any title ever. They didn't lose me when they fired me. They lost me when they assumed I was replaceable. There's a moment in every career when silence becomes louder than protest, not because you give up, but because you finally understand where your power actually lives. This story isn't about winning an argument or humiliating someone who underestimated you. It's about choosing restraint when retaliation feels tempting, and letting truth move through systems the way it's designed to. What stayed with me wasn't the money or the titles that followed. It was the realization that dignity doesn't come from being needed in a crisis. It comes from knowing when to step back and let accountability do its work. Walking away calmly took more strength than staying angry ever would. And strangely, that calm became the turning point that changed everything. Here's the hard question I keep coming back to. If you were in that room fired unfairly, blamed quietly, watching everything unravel, would you fight to be heard? Or would you trust yourself enough to let the consequences speak for you? There's no easy answer, but there is an honest one, and it looks different for each of us. If this story resonated with you, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Your voice matters here. And if you believe stories like this help people feel less alone, a single subscription from you helps this message reach someone who might need it today. A like, a comment, or a share isn't just engagement, it's a small act of support that can shift how someone sees their own worth. You're not just watching a story, you're helping one travel further. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.